Hi, I'm Eric.
I'm JJ.
And today we're going to continue talking about carnivore as a skill. We did step 1 last week called acceptance.
Acceptance,
A
yes.
very important step, although it's not something that you stop doing.
And briefly, that's acceptance of where you are. We get into more of it in that video, so we encourage you to watch that. And as a sort of a step 2, as you're expanding your skills, step 2 is really educating, researching, learning, study.
Because skills are learnable, that's the whole premise behind it. And the next step is to actually convince yourself that it's a good idea. And why would that be difficult to do?
Well, if you're like us Gen Xers here, and pretty much the whole world, you've been told that fat is bad for most of your life. You've been told that LDL cholesterol is really a primary marker we need to be concerned about. You've been told that vegetables, boy oh boy, eat the rainbow. That is going to bring you good health, healthy fiber. All of that we have been indoctrinated with our entire lives.
And it has resulted in sickness. And so that is a big problem. Now, some would argue, well, if you only ate chicken breast and broccoli and salmon, you'd be in perfect health and you wouldn't have to worry about any of this. And if you can be successful with that, more power to you. But most people aren't, and so they're looking for alternatives, and we're discovering that we've kind of been living in a bizarro world, upside down land, opposites day, as our daughter used to say when she was 4 years old. We've been living in opposites day for decades. And so the things we've been avoiding, we should be eating, and the things we shouldn't be eating, we've been told we should.
Now let's pause a moment. We're going to go more into the education research and the importance of it, but where has that path, that bizarro world path, led you to? Where were you?
Okay, so it led me to a constant yo-yo with my weight, IBS, acid reflux. I think it contributed to mental health issues that I've since been successful in managing. Definitely some weird blood markers over the ages. And who knows what other of the various, minor medical issues that I've had over my life were directly the result of that advice.
Now, what's really interesting for me, to me, is my first step into bizarro world was finding out that I had a massive gluten intolerance, possibly celiac. I never got the final test. I got all the others, but never the final test. So right there, I was cutting healthy wheat out of my diet right there. And
I was so skeptical.
You were so skeptical.
I thought it was nonsense pseudoscience.
But my issues were really hormonal and having adrenal fatigue, hypothyroidism, and a multitude of other female hormone issues that really left me low energy and low mood most of my daughter's childhood, actually, unfortunately. And so for me, just learning this way of eating step by step, I've been gluten-free for 12 years now. That was step 1. But then moving to more of a paleo diet, and then gradually moving into the proper human diet, which for me personally includes time-restricted eating. And then that moved into a mainly meat diet, a more of a ketovore, mainly meat diet for the most part. So
a lot of this study happened for me a while back when I decided to go into keto to try to lose weight at the time. And while I was never extremely overweight, I was never satisfied with my body composition. And I had a lot of sort of medical concerns that were unfounded. But I always thought if I could get my weight under perfect control, then I wouldn't have to worry about anything. And so I had totally dismissed the Atkins diet when it became sort of a kind of reignited in the, I guess, late 90s. I knew some people, some colleagues who were doing it, and I just laughed at them for being so stupid. Because don't you know that all of that saturated fat that you're eating is going to give you heart disease? And yet, I eventually got kind of to a desperate place where I'm like, well, I'm going to try it because it seems like it works so well for people. And for me, weight loss was just magical on it. And it was kind of irritating to some.
Yeah, irritating to some.
But I was always managing my 20 grams of carbs to be the most delicious, tasty carbs possible. And so I could never shake my sweet tooth addiction. And eventually I'd sort of fall off the wagon with keto because I was always getting that sweet into my mouth every single day. But the whole point of that was, even with keto, I was really struggling to eat the fat on the steak because all of those decades it had been cut it off and leave it either for the dogs or throw it away. And it was one of the most important things on the plate that I should have been eating. And the broccoli, which I wasn't allowed to have butter on to make it even remotely palatable, I was doing this kind of thing going, "Ugh."
At least you could get it down. Half the time I was having to get my napkin and get rid
Yeah.
of it.
Cauliflower I could do better. For some reason, it wasn't quite as bitter. But when we were doing the riced cauliflower,
Ooh.
I had to draw the line at one point. I'm like, I would rather just die. Now, that's an overstatement, but I would rather just eat unhealthfully than ever eat riced cauliflower again in my life. So the study part is very much about not necessarily convincing yourself that you know all of the science down to the finest level so you can refute all of your relatives when they tell you you're stupid or crazy, or fight with your doctor who totally disagrees with you and thinks you're mad because your LDL is crazy high now. None of that is important as it is in convincing yourself that, one, it can work and you will feel great. And that is, there is none of the other issues matter as much as you getting into your mind this idea that there's actually hope that you will have all of these symptoms resolve.
And sometimes that takes time.
It does.
Sometimes that takes time. So that constant stream, for me anyway, it was it still is constant. This constant stream of relearning, because I can't keep everything in my head, but relearning the science and getting that inspiration really helped me to stay on track when, for instance, now I've mentioned I got my first results in 2 weeks with a reduction in allergies when I started time-restricted eating. So I knew some healing was happening right away when I started that. Yet it was 7 months before I really saw weight loss. Now, I was seeing some changes in my body. I was continuing to feel better and my energy was getting better. So I had some clues that things were happening, yet again, needed that constant reassurance, that constant education, reassurance, and it helped keep me on the path. And
that 7 months might have been even more tolerable if we had done what we're going to advise you to do now, which is do some baseline measurements. One would be body composition, because you were certainly undergoing body recomposition during that period of time where you were exchanging body fat for muscle, and it didn't show up on the scale.
Yeah.
And that would have been encouraging to see. The other thing to do at this stage is get those blood labs done so that you can compare them in 90 days or 6 months to see where you're at. And also, the education part is helping you understand what you might see when those blood labs come in, because some of it will be amazing.
Red.
And some of it will be the dreaded red.
The red zone.
I don't know why they have to put, I don't know, with Quest, we get Quest. And when you go on their dashboard, anything that's out of range is red. It's a 5-alarm fire. They probably should call the medevac immediately to come down and swoop in, take you and a copy of your labs and take you to the nearest ER so a doctor can tell you to eat more broccoli and stop eating steak. But short of that, you need that, and you will definitely be in conversation with a doctor in order to get that. Some won't do all the labs you probably need, and this can be a challenge. You can actually buy access to labs directly through. I've used walk-in labs. There's a Own Your Own Labs, I think, is another one.
Yeah.
You can order them on Quest yourself as well, but you obviously have to pay out of pocket. But before you do it, I highly recommend Dr. Berry's Common Sense Labs.
Oh, yes.
That's a book.
Yes. It was an ebook.
I don't know. I know you can get it on Amazon now because I just looked at it, and we'll put a link down here for you if you want to check it out.
Yeah.
But it's really important to get a lot of labs done to see kind of the state of your health, because then when you institute some sort of change in your diet, you can see the effect it has had. And I mean, we've had so many labs. I was just there this morning getting my blood drawn.
Yeah.
They took like 8 vials. If you're afraid of needles and that's stopping you, I understand that. I had a similar issue for many years, but it does get a lot easier when you do it all the time. And I actually donate blood every opportunity
It's
I'm
mind-blowing.
eligible for. It's crazy.
Go tell your 25-year-old self that.
He would deny that it's me. He'd say, I've been replaced by someone else.
What bizarro world is this?
Yeah.
So step 2, really educating yourself about the diet itself, the benefits, the lab work, just really building that belief.
Build belief.
Build belief. Yeah.
Because you have decades, most likely, if you're watching this, of the brainwashing of the wrong sort. I actually want to talk on one thing that you'll hear if you tell anyone that you're doing carnivore, is they will say, that's an extreme diet. And I've done a lot of thinking about this because from a certain frame of reference, it does look extreme. But if you think about what other things are in life are extreme, like extreme sports, or like, those wingsuits where they jump off of ledges and fly down, or bungee jumping, or snowboarding where they do lots of flips and stuff, where they're extreme because they're perceived to be high risk. And that's because most people don't do that kind of thing at speed, flipping upside down and flying in wingsuits. That's dangerous. And so the idea is, well, this carnivore diet is dangerous. That's why it seems extreme. And while it is eliminating a whole macronutrient, carbs, if we reframe our minds to say, well, wait a minute, how did humans evolve in the first place to eat? And if you watch Dr. Berry and others talk about ancestrally appropriate diet, what's extreme is what's being recommended today as a healthy diet. It's really dangerous. And so what we're currently doing, that's the extreme diet. What we've moved into is actually the most conservative diet that there is.
I like that framing.
Yeah. It's like, it's just easy.
And I do know for me too, though, that piece of being ancestrally appropriate and getting that education was extremely important for me.
It's very convincing. As a matter of fact, I was watching a YouTuber recently who they talk about the findings of different hominins, like Homo erectus and Cro-Magnon, or whatever they're called. And one of the interesting things is when they find the teeth, they don't have cavities because they didn't eat pasta and healthy whole grains. They ate animals. Pretty cool. So, carnivore is a skill. We're learning. We're glad to have you learning with us.
Yes, we are. Thanks for joining us. And it helps us out. Always please hit like, subscribe, and we'd love to hear from you as well in the comments.